As we navigate the days of our lives in this stormy political climate, are we not pressured to choose a side? How are we to choose without clear and concise information to evaluate? Politicians say one thing and then do another. Icons of American business fall daily as woeful tales of greed and corruption are revealed. Crime is rampant. Here in the United States, we have actually had a murder capital every year for the last decade, perhaps even longer. I really didn't go back very far. It's kind of sad and depressing to look up those kind of facts. So it may be more important now than ever to try to identify beyond any particular political party and become part of the political ideal. You can belong to any party, but the question is which faction? Therefore, I shall try to point out a few major differences between the two main factions of liberalism and conservatism. Now, in my mind, most notably, liberalism cannot sustain itself. It requires constant change, or at least constant agitation against existing boundaries, for without this it has no purpose. Liberalism could not exist if it agreed with existing boundaries. For example, abortion. If liberalism said, oh, abortion? No abortion? Okay, no abortion. Then liberalism would not exist, because that is conservatism. So if liberalism did not agitate against existing boundaries, it would just become conservatism, wouldn't it? That is to say that without the conservative boundaries to rail against, liberalism would just wither away, having eventually erased all rules and regulations. Conservatism, by contrast, would actually thrive if somehow liberalism were erased, because nothing would challenge tradition, nothing would challenge the status quo, and conservatism would just sit there all smug and happy and rock away on its little porch watching the sunrise and the sunset. Just witness our remaining national holidays and traditions, the 4th of July, Labor Day, etc. All these traditions so far are safe in the comforting arms of conservative ideals. Not so fast. Let's take a look at the winter holiday, once known as Christmas. This was renounced and renamed by liberal activism. Imagine that, the mightiest of all of our religious holiday icons reduced and renamed to a mere seasonal event. This is not because conservatism embraced it. This is because liberalism agitated against it. This contrast is simply because conservatism has its roots in tradition and liberalism has its roots in doing away with traditions and implementing its own seemingly better ideas. Eventually, this monstrosity known as liberalism would simply eat itself and cease to exist if conservatism was erased. Now, conservatism, in the absence of liberalism, would remain steadfast to its traditions with only minor and necessary changes along the way, thus ensuring a stable and promising future. It's a pretty stark and blatant contrast, right? Well, not exactly. History reveals that conservatism has failed to protect its precious traditions and often goes flaccid when challenged. Again, witness the winter holiday, abortion issues, the efforts to remove Christianity from schools while other religions are given a pass. Look at the implementation of sexual education in schools as early as kindergarten. Birth control being handed out in grade schools. These are not conservative values. These are not conservative traditions. These are liberal ideas. So what's happened? Well, conservatism has not succeeded. And where are the conservative heroes? Well, that's a good question, and to answer it, we need to look back to this nation's very roots. Here we will discover that libs and cons are actually one and the same with only a few degrees of separation between them. Back then, the great people who founded this nation were all liberals by definition. That is to say that if they were conservatives, they would have just followed the King of England. But being liberals, desiring liberties, and wishing to be liberated, they sought a more liberal lifestyle. And once they accomplished it, some figured it was time to create a lawful and legal society. Others agreed, only less so. Out of these opposing views and much debate, our Constitution was born. It was and is quite the liberal document. At the moment in time of its ratification until this very day, it is a liberal document. And if you need proof, just cast your eye about the globe and count the number of nations with such a document. Indeed, it is a singularly liberal work that protects and ensures our liberties. Having examined this aspect, is it not readily apparent the reason that we, the population of the United States of America, often instinctively wonder, what is the difference anyway? Is there any difference between them? Will our votes actually count? If there's no fundamental difference between the two sides, then what? If they're all really on the same track, just moving at different speeds towards the same end, what are we supposed to do? The answer is just as simple as it was to reveal the question. We need a new party. It could be called the Constitutionist Party. You could be liberal or conservative in nature, and by belonging you would signify that you require the Constitution to be loved, honored, and obeyed by the servants elected to serve the nation. There would still be the same kind of government give and take and debate and laws passed and things like that. It would just function as it was intended to function. It's really a simple answer. It's a very liberal answer.